Let's go. Over to you.
So hi, Anne. I mean, how have you been doing, I guess, firstly, over this last year, the 2020, going into 2021 pandemic?
Yeah, it is nearly a year now.
Yeah.
Well, I've been very blessed because I'm on Dartmoor. So, I don't see a lot of people anyway. B, I've got the moor to exercise and wander over, and it's very beautiful. And my great fear is that I could get used to this sort of life.
Yeah, I can only imagine. I mean, so you've been coping with the lockdown sort of isolation okay, I guess?
Oh, completely. I mean, I've always liked my own company anyway. I chose to live where I live because I do like isolation. Doesn't mean I'm antisocial. But on the whole, this suits me very well. So I haven't got any complaints at all.
Yeah. What have you been doing with yourself over lockdown? Have you been doing much writing? Are you writing?
No, I mean, there were a sort of 1,000 projects I thought I might embark upon during lockdown, but somehow there's never quite been the time. I don't know where it goes. Yeah.
Just having some of that personal time, I suppose.
Well, it's been great.
Yeah.
I mean, today, for example, we've got quite deep snow here. And so I couldn't get out even if I tried, not even to walk. So after this Zoom interview, I shall probably light a log fire. And yeah, exactly. And just relax and enjoy the snow.
Yeah. Is there any sort of TV series or Netflix that you've been involved into?
I've been re-watching Foyle's War.
Foyle's War. Yes, that's great. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I love a police story, but I like one without sort of swearing and sex and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
Other than very stylized violence, for the murder. So, and that suits me.
Yeah. Have you watched The Crown? Have you seen The Crown?
No, I haven't, and I wouldn't. I don't think it's fair on the royal family.
Yeah, I think there's been a lot of controversy over the sort of the Princess Di sort of series that's been coming out and how they've been portrayed. Do you think like stuff like that should be on television if it's not completely factual?
No, I don't, unless there's a sort of a major warning that comes with it. They say it's based on facts, and that always means, of course, that it's not factual. I mean, that's the first thing. When you hear this is based on a true story, you know that the story you're seeing is not true. It's merely based on, loosely, something which happened. I think if that is always made clear, then, it's not so bad. But otherwise, I think it can be very misleading. People do believe a lot of what they see and hear. I mean, I can't believe the number of people who are taking relatively seriously, all the conspiracy theories that are rushing around on social media at the moment, and I roar with laughter.
Yeah, well, it's the one about the vaccine, right?
The vaccine. Well, it's got chips in, and we're all going to be tracked or something. I mean, honestly, how do they believe it?
I know, yeah. It's the Bill Gates agenda, apparently. I think some people have been saying. I don't know for what possible reason.
Yeah, which all the world's governments are signing up to, because it doesn't make any sense at all.
No, not. I mean, how do you think our government's been doing with the whole pandemic? I mean, at first it's been a bit like you've got to be a bit easy on them at first because it's such an unprecedented thing. It's never happened before. But do you think they're getting a bit of stick at the moment in terms of not learning from the past lockdowns and the past actions that we've done?
I strongly disapproved of the first 2 lockdowns. This one I have been more acceptant of because there are factors present that weren't there before. You've got the coincidence with the winter pressures that are always on the NHS, the winter flu, etc. That's come. Secondly, the transmissibility and the strain is different. So one has to take that into account. And thirdly, of course, you can see a purpose to this lockdown because of the vaccination program, which has been a huge success for the government. But because of that, you can see that there is some purpose to the lockdown because you've got something to come out to that might actually stand the test of time. But the first 2 lockdowns, 95% of those who died were either in advanced old age or had an underlying health condition, or in a large number of cases, both. And therefore, I could see no sense at all in crashing the economy when only 5% of the working population was going to be affected by this disease, badly affected, that is. We can all get it and not even know we've got it. but badly affected. I couldn't see the point. My view was you should have locked down those who were elderly and unhealthy, and then concentrated on what you could do to protect them, particularly those in care homes who were more or less neglected. You then concentrate on how you can support a lockdown of that group with things like mixing, once people had been totally isolated for 3 weeks, for example, mixing only with people who had also been totally isolated for 3 weeks, could have organised all of that. Instead of which, we have the worst of both worlds. We crashed the economy, and we didn't actually support that 95% of people who were going to get it badly, even though we knew what the definition was, and we knew, which sort of portion of the population they were in. We didn't support them. So we had the worst of two worlds, and we had that in both the first two lockdowns. As I say, I'm more acceptant of this one. I'm not saying I'm 100% happy, but I'm much more acceptant of this one than I was of the other two.
Yeah, do you think this has to be the last one we have, the last lockdown? We can't go back into this.
We can't. I mean, if this doesn't work, then we have got to live with the disease. And that doesn't mean letting it rip, as some people suggest. I mean, you didn't say in the Second World War, oh, let the bombs drop. I mean, you built a whole range of defences against them, from barrage balloons, Air Force attacks, air raid shelters, wardens, civilian wardens, huge effort to try and make it, and of course the air raid warnings, to try and make it as possible to keep people safe in a situation which you could not avoid. And so you didn't say let the bombs drop, and I wouldn't say let the virus rip. I would say, right, now let's look at the precautions we can take while still functioning normally. And let's particularly look at looking after the people, I mean, most of whom are retired, so it should be perfectly possible looking after the people who are seriously vulnerable to this. Otherwise, you'll be in and out of lockdown, and there will come a point when the economy will be unrecoverable.
Yeah. Well, how do you feel about, I guess, children and teenagers and sort of losing that the academic experience, whether it be they were meant to have their first year at secondary school, or their GCSE year, or their first year at university.
Yeah.
I mean, how do you think that generation are going to recover from this?
Well, I'm very, very sorry for the university students, because this has effectively straddled 2 university years. And the second half of last year and the first half of this year, in university terms, has been completely wrecked. And university is such an experience. I had the time of my life at Oxford, and I just feel so sorry for them. But they will recover. I mean, they will. In fact, I talked to a couple the other day who said they were now going to do a postgraduate degree simply in order to get the university experience, which I thought was quite funny. But I am sorry for them, but they'll recover. The very young will recover. Their education's been interrupted, but there are youngsters all over the world who have to learn remotely, particularly out in places like the wilds of Australia, for example, where they are always taught remotely. So they will recover. The people whom the government are going to have to sort out very speedily are those in public examination years, the GCSEs and the A-levels. Now, the government's got to come up with a solution to that. Whether it is that everybody repeats a year, or whether it is that they have a different method of examination, that's up to them. But those are the students who are going to be most immediately affected, because GCSEs and A-levels are in order to enable you to carry on beyond that to the next stage, whatever it might be. So that's where I think they've got to concentrate their efforts.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, thinking about the seeds as well, across the pond in the United States. I mean, how did you feel when you saw the Capitol building? I mean, what were your thoughts?
I was appalled. I was absolutely appalled. Now, to be fair to Trump, he didn't say let's storm the Capitol. But I mean, the lesson is that when you whip up a crowd, there comes a point where you lose control of it. It does what it wants to do, or rather elements within it do what they want to do. And that's what happened at the Capitol. It is quite right that everybody who is engaged in that riot should pay the penalty due at law, because you have to discourage that sort of thing in the future. I don't think he deliberately incited it. I think he was very angry. I think he got his supporters very angry. But I think then he relied on those supporters to contain their anger in a way that they probably were never going to do.
Yeah, I mean, but he also, he kept talking about the election being stolen and the election being rigged. And we spoke kind of about, conspiracy theories and things like that. Is there any way that the President of the United States and the information that he has can genuinely believe that the election has been rigged?
Well, first of all, that is perfectly normal language in the States. If you actually look back to what happened when Trump first won, Nancy Pelosi actually tweeted out, "This election has been stolen."
Oh, okay.
This sort of, and it's there, and it's on the public record. So that sort of language isn't as unusual as it would be for us. We wouldn't say that. But I can quite well believe that there was fraud. But there always is. In any election, particularly elections where you've got any sort of postal vote at all, there's always fraud. But on the scale that would determine the outcome of the election, I would think intuitively, at any rate, is very unlikely to have been on that sort of scale. Now, he might be able to produce evidence of this went wrong and that went wrong and somebody did this and somebody did that. But on a scale sufficient to have swayed the election, there would have to be a huge body of evidence for that. I don't think it's there, but having said that, what do I know?
Well, I mean, something that you do know about is censorship, because you've spoken about it. I've seen some of your talks about censorship. And I mean, do you think it's dangerous now that the ex-president of the United States, no matter what, I know he's very opinionated and says how he feels for sure, but how dangerous is it to deplatform him, to take away his social medias?
If he were deliberately inciting sedition and rebellion and all the rest of it, then that would be perfectly reasonable. But simply to do that because you think that you don't agree with what Trump says, and I think most of us would have severe difficulty with some of the things he said, then that is wrong. And I think we have to distinguish between saying you stop somebody's platform because that person is dangerous. And that doesn't mean a debating platform, because by definition, if it's a debating platform, you've got somebody on the other side and you can hear both sides. But if it's somebody who is dangerous, somebody who's inciting terrorism or whatever it might be, or putting people on the path to terrorism, that is one thing. But just because you disagree with every last view that somebody has got, and just because you think that view is wrong, possibly even damaging, doesn't matter. That's still that person's liberty to say what they think. I feel very, very strongly about this. I suspect one of the things you're referring to is my debate at the Oxford Union.
Yes, yeah.
In 2019, when I pointed out, that I grew up in the post-war years, and people had lost sons, brothers, fathers, husbands to the Nazis. They'd lost their limbs. Civilians had died. People had lost their homes. And that had only just happened. And yet people like Oswald Mosley and Colin Jordan were able to hold their rallies. And similarly, when we were in the height of the Cold War, you could still proclaim yourself a communist. You could stand for Parliament even as a communist. Wouldn't get in, but you can stand. You can sell the Morning Star on street corners. You can openly subscribe to the Communist Party. You can write communist opinions in the press. And that was at a time when we were engaged in the Cold War. And that was because we valued liberty. And I mean, the maxim I grew up with, which is a cliche now, but never mind, because it's a cliche for a good reason. And that is that however profoundly you disagree with somebody, you can still defend to the hilt, their right to say it. And I think we have lost sight of that second point, that if you defend somebody now, everybody thinks, oh, you're defending what they've said or what they did. And I say, no, I'm defending their right to do it and say it.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a point that you made as well in that Oxford talk about, you'd love to have the a debate with someone that was a Holocaust denier, for example. You'd love to be able to have that conversation with them. But a bit like Trump as well, like deplatforming him only fuels their anger in a way. Absolutely. Because when he's saying stop the steal, the election was rigged, and you take away that voice, his supporters are going to be like, there's something in this that they don't want us to know.
Yeah. And that is the great danger with driving anything underground. Now, I would not sit on a platform with a Holocaust denier unless I was debating against him. I wouldn't sit there, and just listen to his views. But I think it is much healthier to debate and to destroy than it is to drive something underground. And then people do say, oh, well, there must be something in this. Get it out in the open, and there's nothing in it except lunacy. So let's see that. Yeah.
Do you think he will be impeached, Trump?
Oh yeah, I think so. Yeah. Nothing much will happen, but it's a way
it's
a way I suppose of trying to stop him running again. Yeah.
And you just worry if that's going to cause more scenes like we saw in the new year.
Well, impeachment is a process of justice, or certainly quasi-justice. So one must just let that go on.
Yeah, obviously you're known for being fairly outspoken yourself. Is there anything you feel that you've said it's been taken by, we talk about fake news and things like that, and it's been taken out of context
all the time.
Yeah,
all the time. One of the things, didn't even say. One of the things, for example, is that there is a complete urban myth about the place, but every so often it comes into the newspapers and I have to get a retraction and an apology. And I got legal warnings on the files of every newspaper in the country just about. Is people say that I believed in and indeed effected while I was in the Home Office, chaining women up in labour and childbirth. It's actually on the record in Hansard, where I said quite clearly, it's never been the policy of any prisons minister or of any director of the prison service, never been the policy of any government or of the prison service to secure women in labour or childbirth. It is there on the record in black and white, undeniable, and yet the myth has grown up.
Yeah, well, there's another example as well, because there is that headline of you sort of saying that science can cure homosexuality, and then you watch the video, and it's like, well, the headlines the headline gives it more of a thing than what you actually say.
They protected themselves very nicely against libel on that occasion, because what they've done is quote me exactly when I said, and it may be that one day science will find a solution, and I was talking about transitioning, and they put inverted commas around that, and then they added the words to homosexuality. I had never said that. I had never said that. I've never used the word cure, and yet this is all attributed to me. And I'm afraid that's an occupational hazard of public life. And in fact, on a much lesser scale than any of that, people do not read what you have written. So these are your own words that have appeared under your own name in a newspaper column, clearly your own words. People don't read it. They get an impression and they go on that. And I'm amazed sometimes people write to me and say, well, you said so-and-so. And I say, go back and reread it. Pretend you're doing a comprehension test. They're actually rude enough to say that occasionally. Pretend you're actually doing a comprehension test and then tell me what you get. And of course, it's different. And some people do actually apologize, and I always admire that. I had a lot of apologies after the homosexuality row, which you've mentioned, because I simply wrote back a one-line response to people. And I said, are you reacting to the interview or to the media frenzy? And then a lot of people, some people retracted, others just went very silent.
Yeah, well, it's the headline sometimes as well, isn't it? Because even on like YouTube or something like that, you can see Ann Widdecombe says science could provide a cure for homosexuality. Then you watch the video and it's like, well, that's so out of context. Yeah.
I know.
Yeah, it's it's not. you're right that our media does that, but you know.
And actually, I was on the Ian Dale programme on LBC, and Ian Dale, of course, is openly gay and a great friend of mine. And I said to him on the programme, I said, if I thought one half of what people say I think, would you want to know me? And he said no. And that sums it up.
Yeah, absolutely.
I
mean,
people like Andrew Pearce, you know, Craig Revel-Horwood, Amanda Barry, they know I don't think like that.
Yeah. And it's sometimes I don't know if it's a tack on. I mean, I'm a Christian myself. Is it kind of when people realize that you have that faith, they want to, sometimes, not everyone, but sometimes they do want to attack it. It's like, well, you know, when I sort of say, well, yeah, I'm a Christian, I go to church, they kind of go, what's your view on this? What's your view on that? And they kind of want you to kind of almost slip up, you know, before you say anything.
And that is because they have already got a distorted view of what the church teaches. And I find one of the things very, very difficult now, people have lost sight of forgiveness. The whole thing's about vengeance. It's about lock them up, throw away the key. People have completely forgotten but for the grace of God go I. They've completely lost sight of that. And I find that very difficult, because sometimes I will write in those terms and I'll get an absolute shower of abuse from people that I'm defending some awful person or I'm defending what they've done. And when I questioned, for example, the wisdom of hoiking a 97-year-old man into a juvenile court because he was 17 at the time of the alleged offence, because he had been a guard in a concentration camp with absolutely no record at all of active participation. When I simply queried, is this proportionate at this stage when he's 97? Is it proportionate to punish him because he wasn't brave enough at 17 to stand against a ghastly regime like that, even though he directly did no wrong? The reaction was that I defended an actual Nazi, as if I'd defended the concentration camp or defended what his role is, when all I'd actually done was query proportionality. You can't win. You don't expect to win if you're in public life. You know that people will distort anything.
Yeah, I mean, one of the battles you've had recently was the Brexit battle, which seemed to drag on and drag on and drag on. I mean, I did vote Remain. That's only, you know, it was not an easy decision for me. It was something that I felt like I couldn't, without doubt, say what Brexit was. I didn't have, you know, 100% clear knowledge.
Well, now you know it's about getting the vaccines, don't you?
Well, yes, but yes. I mean, do you? I guess firstly, now we have this deal, do you feel like it's the best possible deal that we could have hoped for? No. No.
First of all, there was a huge sellout on fishing. But even more important than that, vastly more important than that, in my view, at any rate, we created a border down the Irish Sea, which effectively means we've cut Northern Ireland off from the rest of the UK. And we also left them in the single market. So we've separated them from the rest of the UK. My view is that was a severely retrograde step, and it should never, ever have happened. So no, I don't think this is the best deal we could have got. That doesn't mean that I want to rewrite it now. I think we've got a simple choice now. We either get some common sense in terms of practicalities out of the EU as to how we're going to implement it, or we simply break it. We simply say, well, you know, this isn't what we asked for. This isn't what you said would happen, and therefore, no, we're not going ahead with this. Yeah. What I don't think you can do is start another negotiation.
Yeah, I mean, when you sort of left politics, did you ever think in your wildest dreams you'd be on the front line again like this?
Oh no, never. I mean, I was loving retirement. I'd done Strictly, you know, I did Big Brother. I was doing television quiz shows for charity. I was doing pantomime every year. You know, I had one lined up that year, which I had to drop. That was my retirement. And if you'd said to me, even as late as January 2019, if you'd said to me then, Anne, you're going to go back into politics, you're going to change party, and by the way, you're going to become a member of the European Parliament, I would have said, lie down and have an aspirin. And that's certainly not going to happen. But gradually my frustration with Theresa May and with the non-implementation of the referendum result That frustration finally came to a head, and I said, right, well, am I going to go on just writing about this in my Daily Express column and yelling from my armchair, or am I actually going to do something about this? And I was speaking on a cruise ship, and we were doing the Norwegian fjords, and I stood in a fjord one afternoon, not in the field, by it, one afternoon, and I crossed a Rubicon. And I took out my mobile phone and I rang Nigel Farage. And the rest was my history of the last 2 years.
Yeah, and I mean, suppose, how do you think the Brexit Party, are you sort of happy with what you achieved, or did you think that,
oh yes,
did you
we
hope
got
for more?
Brexit.
Yeah.
Basically, we got Brexit, I mean, in different ways. First of all, its predecessor, UKIP, managed to win the referendum. Then the Brexit Party managed to get rid of Theresa May as a result of that overwhelming success in the European elections.
Yeah.
And then, of course, Boris had to make a platform of Brexit, which he did, and he said, get Brexit done. And we withdrew our candidates in Conservative seats so that he would win. He owes the size of his majority to the Brexit Party. And so we effectively got Brexit. And we spent 7 months in the European Parliament arguing for Brexit. And so, yes, I'm happy with what the Brexit Party achieved. Mm-hmm. I have to say I am deeply relieved that I did not end up back in Parliament. In the earlier stages, when we appeared to be fighting every seat and we were, very, very high in the polls and all the rest of it, I thought, oh, this could actually happen. And I didn't want it to happen, really. But I did think it was my duty to go out there and fight under the banner. And then when Nigel decided we weren't going to fight Conservative seats, which meant that we couldn't form a government, which meant that actually we weren't offering the electorate anything much, I thought, right, this isn't going to happen. But I went ahead and I still fought the campaign because I thought, we've still got a message that we've got to get across out there.
Yeah. And I suppose in that general election night, I mean, I remember just watching it thinking, please let be a hung parliament, please let be a hung parliament. But I mean, the Tories won overwhelmingly. I mean, where do you think?
We did that. We did that. I mean, if you actually look at the red wall seats, in numerous seats, they actually won by less than the number of votes we took from Labour.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I mean, where do you think it went so wrong for Labour, though, in terms of some of the places that there would have been a banker for Labour to get a seat, just going the other way? Do you think it was more because of their stance on Brexit, just sort of not a clear view where they sort of felt, or was it Jeremy Corbyn? What was the reason?
Well, I know very well that Corbyn terrified people, because I had people on the doorstep saying they wanted to vote for me. They would quite like to have me as their MP. But they had to stop Corbyn. And the only way to stop Corbyn was to vote for a major party. And I understood that. Frustrating though it was, I understood it entirely. So people were terrified of Corbyn, but I think something else was going on. If you actually look at the seats which delivered a leave vote in the referendum, there were an awful lot of Northern Labour seats that did that. Yet their party in Westminster went entirely the other way. And I think they just felt the Labour Party wasn't speaking for them anymore. It was speaking for the metropolitan elite, wasn't speaking for them. I think there was a real disengagement of the normal Labour voters from the Labour Party.
Yeah, I mean, one thing I'm hoping that we don't get again is another Scottish referendum. I mean, there's the noises about that at the minute. I mean, do you see it happening again? It just feels like it wasn't that long ago we had another one, and I'm not even sure why they want another one. But are you hoping we don't see another one of them?
Well, I certainly hope we don't see it. We won't see a legal referendum because Boris has made it quite clear they can't have one, and they do need Westminster's consent to have a referendum at all. But there may well be an illegal, a wildcat referendum, may well be. Oh, and that in itself is dangerous, because if people think, well, this isn't legally binding, then they can do whatever they want to do for whatever motive they may have at the time. I think there is a danger to the union there, but it should be perfectly possible to convince the Scots that alone, without us, they won't be much better off than Greece in the EU. if they're even admitted to the EU. I mean, Spain has a big problem with Catalonia. Now, I don't actually think they may be wanting to encourage breakaway countries.
Yeah, I mean, going back to, I suppose, you spoke about Strictly and Big Brother. I guess out of those two different reality shows, both very different challenges, what was the toughest one for you to do?
Oh, Strictly was undiluted fun. I mean, Strictly was just fun. I never took it seriously because I didn't honestly expect to get beyond sort of week 2 or 3. I really didn't. I thought I was going out very early. I mean, I couldn't dance. Come on. Everybody could see that. I couldn't dance, couldn't hear the music. I've got no sense of music and timing. And Anton called it a lot of things, but he never called it dancing, not once. And we did comedy, basically. And it was great fun. And there was nothing depending on it, I mean, it wasn't a world war, it wasn't a major political event, nothing depended on it. I couldn't do anybody any harm, or Anton shins possibly, but nothing else. So it was a complete release from responsibility, and it was undiluted fun. Big Brother was very different, and the only similarity between Big Brother and Strictly was that, again, I expected to go out very early, because I gave my views, and a lot of them are not popular views, as you indicated earlier in this discussion. And I gave my views when asked for them. I didn't impose them on anybody, but I gave them when asked. And I thought I should go out very early from this. But no, I was the runner-up, just as I lasted 10 weeks in Strictly. But Big Brother was not fun in the same sense. Jean-Paul Sartre said, hell is other people. And when you're locked up with a small group from whom you cannot get away, and you're locked up, as I was, for 4 weeks with these people, you've got no contact with the outside world at all. You don't know what's going on in the outside world. And the only stipulation I had to make, I said, look, if the monarch dies, because I'm a Privy Councillor, I've got to leave the house immediately if that happens. But other than that, I had no contact with the outside world. I didn't know what was going on. And you're with this group of people who are selected because they're expected to argue, because they have nothing in common. And they're selected for that reason. And therefore it was quite a strain, but I did get the bit between my teeth, and I did think I really want to survive. I mean, in the first vote, I thought, well, if I go now, that's fine. I still get paid. I've got all the extra time. That's wonderful. Second vote came up, I was sort of slightly more wanting to stay. By the end, I was extremely competitive about the whole thing.
And I suppose because what we see on Big Brother is a sort of smaller version of what's really going on in the house. Is there a lot of sitting around during the day? In Big Brother? Yeah. Huge amount. Yeah. Huge amount. There are times when there are no tasks and all you've got is conversation. You can't even take out a tissue and draw noughts and crosses on it. They'll demand that you put that in the bin. Oh, wow. So you can't read, you can't do puzzles, you can't play games that involve anything. You can play charades, and we did quite a lot, but you can't do anything else. And I suppose you could draw noughts and crosses in condensation on the window pane. They tell you just, rub that out. So, and on those days when there are no tasks, you've got nothing to do except talk to people who A, don't much like what you think, and B, want you out. So they're trying to trip you up the whole time. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, another sort of piece that was on TV that you were involved of was that, the Mick Philpott documentary, and what happened after that was a horrific story. What happened? I mean, you went there to try and get him a job, because he was known as, I suppose. Oh, I did. I got him 3. Well, yeah. I mean, whether jobs. He was going to take them or not is, but he was in. Never. No, yeah. I mean, he was in Jeremy Kyle as Britain's biggest scrounger. I mean, and then obviously what happened was horrific with his children. When you met Mick Philpott, did you ever think he was capable of something like that?
No, I mean, such a thought never crossed my mind. The children were, I mean, they were clothed, they were fed, they had play facilities, they got to school on time. You know, there was no I mean, it was a very dysfunctional setup, but there was no indication that the children were going to suffer in the horrendous way that they did. The one thing I did notice while I was there was I never once saw a child flinch from him, never. I did mark you on a couple of occasions, but I never saw a child do it. But what I did notice was that if a parent sits down in a chair, don't forget there were 11 kids in this house, and sort of 5 or 6 of them were small children, you know, small children, infants. If a parent sits in an armchair, the most normal thing in the world is for small children to climb aboard. You know, they get up on the arm of the armchair or on the parent's lap or whatever. That's the most normal thing in the world. I never saw it happen once, never. And I did comment on that afterwards. I said, you know, there's an absence of warmth, but I never had any indication. I mean, nobody did, that there would be that level of horrendous risk taking, which is what it was. They didn't intend to kill them, but what they did always had the possibility of killing them, or at least causing very serious injury. But I would never have thought that that was going to happen.
Yeah, because I mean, even in the documentary with you, with Mick, there was some aggressive movements towards you as well. Like,
always called me BITCH. Always, you know, that was his way of talking to women. And I remember in the first time I met him, and he showed me his caravan, which he'd got parked in his front drive, and he said to me, "This is where I sleep, and I take it in turns with the women." That's the expression. Every night, first one, and then the next night the other. And what the word he used was this. He said, "And I take it in turns to service them." Not make love, not even have sex, service, like a farm animal. And that really did, even then when I knew nothing about what was going to happen, that really did hit me between the eyeballs, because, you know, who talks like that of their wife and mistress?
Yeah. I mean, did you see that love and affection to his wife and mistress and his children, or were they kind of characters in the Mick Philpott show?
They were characters in the show, but what amazed me was that the mistress finally walked out, because there was no sign of that happening. They were both completely not only under his thumb, but they were under his spell. You know, when I said, were they looking forward to Mick working, because I got him 3 jobs and he was able to choose between them, they both said the same thing. They said, "Oh, well, it'll be nice for Mick." They didn't talk about themselves, whether it'd be a good thing to have money coming in. Just, you know, it'd be nice for Mick. That was all they could come up with. And I was amazed. They both seemed to me pretty feeble. And I was amazed when the mistress finally just walked.
Yeah. And I saw recently in the news that his wife, Mairead, that she'd been released from prison. Yes. I mean, do you think, like, although she was in a position where she could have stopped what had happened with the fire, was she partly a victim as well?
I don't think she was a victim, but I think that she wasn't very bright, and I don't think she thought through what could happen. So therefore it probably never occurred to her to try and stop it, because I don't think, you know, I'm talking here of what I observed, not what I know, but I don't think she would have worked that through and said, well, hang on, Mick, what happens, you know, if the fire gets out of control? Which it did very, very quickly, of course. Very quickly. I don't know. I don't see her as a victim, but equally, as I say, I don't think she was the brightest button in the box.
Yeah, and I think do you think it probably is right that she is out of prison now? Because I mean, she has lost her children. I guess the worst thing she probably did do was carrying on the charade of what happened.
Oh, well, I mean, more than that. I mean, neighbours testified that they were going to parties, you know, they were going to karaoke and things like this, and the neighbours really objected. One neighbour even testified that when Mairead was, I think she was going on television or something, that she took ages trying to get the neighbour to decide what she should wear. And the neighbour said, well, hang on, Mairead, you know, you've lost 6 children. Six. Most of us wouldn't be able to function if we'd lost 1 or 2, but 6. All her children, literally all her children.
Yeah. And I think even in a documentary I watched about it recently, it was just they sort of said Mick there was one of his mates on the street that I live in or something was writing letters and stuff, and there was just no remorse at all. Still sort of everyone else's fault but Mick's. Is that kind of?
I think the judge summed it up, or it could have been the prosecuting counsel. I can't remember which. I think it was the judge who said, "What Mick Philpott wants, Mick Philpott gets." And who summed that up as his attitude to life, basically. And don't forget, he'd already served time for attempted murder.
Yeah. It's just such a sad story, but I mean,
I don't think he's capable of empathy. I don't think he felt for the suffering of those children. He was concerned only for himself.
Yeah, I mean, I guess sort of it's difficult to go on to another topic after speaking about that because it's such a sad story. But I mean, talking about charities, I mean, you're involved in quite a lot of charities. I mean, I imagine you get sort of inundated with charity requests. Yeah, I mean, how do you decide what charities you're going to sort of go with?
Well, I went through a phase of just saying no to everybody, because not because I was mean, but because I already had so many. And I said, look, you know, I can't commit. Now, the normal reaction of a charity when you say that is that they will write back to you and say, we don't want you to do anything. We just want your name on the note paper, you know, as an endorsement. We don't want you to do anything. You don't have to write any letters, you know, etc., etc. But I've tried to pick charities, and you don't sit there looking at 100 and picking them, because 100 don't come to you at once, you know, they come piecemeal. But I try to pick those who are doing things that I think otherwise wouldn't be done at all. For example, my safe haven for donkeys in the Holy Land, where there are very, very few protections for animals at all. So I say, right, well, if they weren't doing this, would anybody else do it? The answer is almost certainly no. And so whether it's a human charity or an animal charity or whatever it may be, then you know, that is the criterion that I use. If they weren't there, would anybody else be doing this?
Yeah, I mean, going back to as well, faith and politics. Has there ever been a time where, in your political career, where there was a bit of a conflict between political decisions and your faith?
Well, I was very blessed in that, because the answer is only once. And I was a backbencher, so I was free to rebel. If I'd been a minister, it would have been a very different cup of tea. But it was the Human Embryology Act, which also had abortion up to birth for the first time in this country. And I said, I can't vote for this. I wasn't even a Catholic at the time, but I'd always been pro-life. And I said, I cannot vote for this, and I'm not going to vote for it. And what's more, I'm going to vote against it. I could do it because I was a backbencher. That is the only occasion I can recollect, because the Conservative Party has a great tradition of giving free votes on issues like that, matters of conscience, free vote. Labour much less so, though sometimes they do. Therefore there's no party line, therefore you can vote any way you like. You know, from the Prime Minister down to the newest backbencher, you can vote any way you like. And so I very rarely had that sort of conflict.
And I mean, and how much, I suppose, does writing mean to you in terms of writing novels or articles or any different non-fiction books? I mean, is writing really something that's important for you? Yes,
and it has been ever since I was a child. I used to write stories as a child, and finished my first novel when I was 18. I'm very glad I didn't try to get it published, because it was set in ancient Rome, and I think if I had got it published, the estate of Quo Vadis would have sued me for plagiarism. And I was still at the stage where I was absorbing a lot of other authors' works. Yes, I've always loved it. It had to wait until the bulk of my parliamentary career was over and I'd come off the front bench. to take it to any extent. But I was delighted with the reception for all the 4 novels. And I wrote a very trivial, very light-hearted detective novel, which I didn't publish in the usual way. I thought, no, this one's, I don't want this judged as a literary work. This is different. So I published that one on Amazon. And I've also, of course, I've written my autobiography, and I've written a book on penance. And as we're coming up to Lent, let me blow my own trumpet a bit and say that it's called Sackcloth and Ashes, and that it's published by Bloomsbury.
Okay, well, a nice little plug there for people that are going to go out and buy the book. I mean, it's been great talking to you today, Anne. I mean, suppose looking back at your whole career, whether it be with the Brexit Party or your time in the Conservative Party or on the reality TV shows, how would you suppose you would like your legacy to be remembered the most?
I think just that I fought the good fight, and I kept the faith, and I finished my course. Mm-hmm. And the more religiously literate amongst your listeners will recognise that. Yeah, absolutely. Well, Anne, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you today. Please stay safe. And yes, and you, and all your listeners. Thank you. Yes, and well, I would say hope to see you again soon, but I guess we don't want to see you in the political. You hope not to be in the political front line again. No, we might see me in other contexts soon. Of course. Well, I'll go and see you in Panto when we're allowed back in the theatres, right? Yes, you can come and see me in Panto. Yes. And I won't be doing quiz shows forever and a day, because your speed of retrieval does diminish as you age a bit. Mm-hmm. But I'm still doing a few at the moment. Good. Right, take care, and I hope to speak to you again soon. Thank you. Thank you.